My dude, I loved today's interview with Greg Denning. Dude is a ninja coach, speaker, just an incredible human being, lives an epic life, as he likes to talk about the epic life, and so true. And I loved, absolutely loved. You have to listen how to turn decades into days and the
Yeah.
power of coaching.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, he's all about creating extraordinary lives, creating extraordinary marriages, extraordinary relationships, and just the intentionality behind it all is amazing. And I love the part about the philosophy journal. I've actually immediately put that into action. So if you want to learn about the philosophy behind that, check it out. Go listen. Great episode. Do it.
Tons of value add. You're going to enjoy this show.
See you.
You're listening to Filling the Storehouse podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Stuart, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living the abundant life through faith, family, and freedom. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours. Together, achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to intentionally fill our storehouse.
Okay, so before we hit record, Greg was talking about something about marketing
How
and
handsome you are, that
handsome
the military would
pilot.
use you
Yeah, something like
in an
that.
aircraft. Yeah,
Something like that.
They were very strategic about that movement.
Yeah,
Like,
of
that
course.
brings in recruits. Just letting
David,
them
and
see
then
you.
David's the guy who's in the dungeon basement that requires 42 ID cards to get in because it's super top secret and
Hey,
in this little hole.
And they never let him out in public.
here's the deal, Stu.
The one light
Here's-
shining, swinging, down in the dungeon. That's where David
Yeah,
used to work.
exactly.
Yeah.
Here's the deal, Stu.
Yeah.
The Navy recognized too much of a good thing also
Uh-huh.
could bring too many numbers, a lot of paperwork, a lot of applications. So they
also true.
wanted to
They got to
keep some of us out of
They
the
got to keep
limelight.
a.
Yeah.
They don't want to overwhelming jealousy. They got to hide a little bit of it.
No. Because then, retention and numbers and just drama
There's
goes up.
way too
significantly.
much drama
So
there.
really-
Oh, totally get it.
Yeah.
Totally get it. Oh.
Greg, dude, I'm glad to have you on the show, man. We connected very briefly. I know David talked to you a little bit more than I did, but we both spoke at the Life and Air Summit. Life and Air is a group that David and I are involved in, and you came and were a keynote speaker and did just an amazing job, man. We really took a lot away from it, and you motivated us to just get better in life and being better husbands and better dads and better leaders and healthier. Man, it was awesome. And so we're really pumped to have you on today. But for our audience, could you just give a little bit of background? Give us your story, like who you are, where you came from, and what you're doing.
Yeah, man. I kind of call it an advantage now, right? It's where you turn your disadvantages into advantages. And so the advantage I have now is that it started out rough, man. Life was hard. My parents divorced, stepdads came and went. We're up to this number 6 now. And they came and went, and I just didn't really have a good manly, fatherly figure in my life and a good example of manhood. So I chose to leave home at 16. I'm like, no, I'm going to go figure this out. I'm done. And of course, those are hard years. This is just tough. And they were challenging, but they forced me into this spot because now I say where there's pain, there's power. And that pain of being lonely on Christmas Eve all by myself, right? Just sitting there in a bad part of town, like this sucks. And it gave me purpose, right? So that pain drove me to purpose. And I'm like, I'm going to figure out, first of all, I was still questioning. I'm like, is it even possible to be really happy and successful? And man, if it is, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to figure out how to do it. And of course, I realized early on, I'm like, nothing will get better in my life until I get better. But on the reverse side of that, as I get better, as you and I get better, it just has this cascade effect that everything else in life starts to get better. So it just became this driving passion for me to dive in and explore everything I could get my hands on, especially for manliness, because I wanted to be a great man, a great husband, a great father, a great businessman. And so I started reading voraciously. I still average a book a week, right? Still pounding the books,
That's awesome,
still learning,
man.
still interviewing people. And so met my wife, and we've been married for 22 years. We have 7 kids.
Wow.
And kind of our family dream We love doing life on our terms, right? So I work from home, wherever that is in the world. We travel like crazy. We love having epic experiences. So that's kind of the basic rundown. Like, I started out hard, and it gave me that conviction. Like, you know what? I want to squeeze the juice out of life. I want to really live while I'm here.
Hey, and I'm curious. So it sounds amazing, right? It sounds like I want to do some self-improvement, get better. My life will get better. But man, this was a journey, right? Like this was not an overnight success. This took years. And I'm curious, what is a practical process that you went through to really get, because you told us your more fully your story at the retreat when you were the keynote speaker, and it was, I mean, I was blown away because if on paper life was not going to be good.
Yeah,
on paper
exactly.
You were not set
I
up
was
for
not heading
success.
in a good direction,
oh
man.
dude,
Yeah.
you were definitely on the path to be a statistic.
Yep.
But now, like, I mean, you literally, and you kind of touched it a little bit, but dude, your life is abundant. Like what you guys do when you say live epically, I mean, give us a taste of that. I'd love for our audience just to hear like kind of a taste of that, but also like, how do you practically, what is some practical advice to get to that next level?
Yeah.
Because it's not, I mean, it's a huge difference from where you came from. Right.
So if I could do life over, dude, your questions are spot on and so powerful. And right out the gates, if I could do life over, the one thing that turns months into moments is a mentor. It's a coach. And I didn't have that. Like, I had to learn things the hard way. I was reading books and like, oh, that's good. But then I'm like, experimentation and trial and error took me years of that grind you're talking about. I'm like, man, if only I'd had more mentors, more coaches, more models, even if I had someone near me. And for a few years, all I got was this tiny glimpse. It's like, oh, that gentleman, he seems like he's got it dialed in. Like, what's he doing differently? Where is he at? And of course, back then we didn't have the YouTube channels and the podcasts like we do now. We didn't have accessibility to the mentors and the models. Or I'm sure I could have taken decades and turned them into days. Because if you find a really great coach and a mentor, they're taking decades of life experience and turning it into something that you and I can consume in days. Just off the charts. So rad. And so there was a challenge there of trial and error and struggle and difficulty. And now we can, this is what I tell my clients, right? You can quite literally collapse a time frame. So instead of it taking you years, we can, with the right ideas and the right tools and the right tactics, I can work with a client. You guys do too, right? This is what you're doing. And you take your client and you collapse time. So if you're like, hey, you can do this on your own, bro, go for it. But it's going to take a while. You want to collapse time? Work with a great coach, someone who has the experience, who has the knowledge. You'll collapse it. You'll take what would take the next 12 months. Why can't you do it in the next 3? I had a coaching session with a client this morning, and his business, he has a huge business, and it's like it's on the edge of trouble, which happens to all of us if you own a business, right? And I'm like, let's go, bro. I'm like, we got the rest of this year. And I love the end of the year because it's like it's a race to the finish line. Like, what can you do in the next 12 weeks to totally transform what's happening? And I've done that. I've helped men do that with like losing 50, 60 pounds of extra weight, or transforming a marriage or a relationship with a kid. And so I don't know. My answer is, yeah, those were long, slow years, and they were a tough grind. And some of that's just that way. But man, with the right leverage, to me, like the right book, the right mentor, the right coach, the right program, the right masterclass or mastermind is that leverage tool. And you're like, oh man, I can move this way faster and way farther in much shorter time. But
I love that.
For a little teaser here, I'll throw a little teaser for the life we're living. We've been stoked about this. So we asked our kids where they wanted to spend Christmas, and they said Norway. So we're going to spend the whole month of December in Norway. And then my daughter, who's 15, she's probably our most adventurous child. And our kids are ranged from age 20 down to age 5. And she was like, I just want to hit a whole bunch of countries by train. I was like, let's do it. So we're going to take trains for the next 8 weeks after that. We're going to take trains all through Scandinavia, all through Eastern Europe, and then all the way across Western Europe, and then go set up a home base in Portugal. So we'll hit like 16, 17 countries. We're a 3-month kind of wandering, and just as a family, just go do this, just have an awesome adventure together. There's a little that's how we roll. And I know it's crazy. It's not for everybody. But I'm like, for us,
That's awesome,
you describe
man.
that, and our family's like, what? When do we go?
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. I'm curious, back to kind of your mentor, your coach, kind of idea and recommendations. A lot of people, you'll talk to a lot of people like, yeah, I have tons of mentors. I have tons of coaches. I listen to podcasts and I read books. And I would say, yeah, that's good. But, however, you have to actually take action on what you're reading, what you're listening to, what you're hearing about. And sometimes you actually need someone like poking on you, right? Like, hey, dude, did you do it? Did you do it? How about doing it this way? Hey, I learned this problem this way because I failed. How about doing it this way instead? Maybe this book isn't the right way for you. And so I'm curious, have you seen that? Like, have you seen like with some of your clients where like just that, like you like digging in, holding them accountable, pouring in, actually face-to-face conversations, like got them over that next hump to get to where they're at?
Every time we meet, brother, you're spot on. In some elements, in fact, in most, that sense of accountability of knowing that, hey, I'm going to talk to you face to face next week, and you have to tell me to my face if you didn't do what you said you were going to do. And that is powerhouse. It's just for all of us. You're like, oh man, especially because you get in there and you're like, hey, what works? And we kind of, brainstorm together and strategize. And you're like, okay, this is going to make a difference. This will move the needle in your favor. Now, how are you going to do that? And we come up with a plan. It's actionable. It's reasonable. It's doable. And you're like, okay, do you commit to this? Yeah. All right. I'm following up with you. And you're following up with me. Like, we're going to make this happen. So you're spot on. And because like, how many of us know what to do, but don't do it? I mean, right. That's probably the most common problem of humanity. Yeah. I know I'm supposed to eat better and exercise and take my wife out and do all these things, but man, getting to it's the
so why do you think that is? Why do you think that we know what to do, but we don't? I mean,
and there's a lot of different reasons. Ultimately, I think at the end of the day, it's a lack of like deep commitment. I think we use the word commitment a little too lightly.
Yeah.
And we throw it around like, yeah, I'll commit to do that, or I commit to this. I'm like, no, man, when you really commit to something, you're putting your integrity on the line. Mm. And so we only commit to a few things because you're like, it doesn't matter what happens. If I commit to something, it's going down, right?
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And I think we think a lot about it. We even talk about it. You and I both know people who for the last 2 decades have been talking about things they're going to do. Mm. And what really separates us out is the very few who do it. I think it was Success Magazine did some research, and they found that only 1.7% of people are actively working to improve their lives, which means that 98.3% of people are talking about it, thinking about it, planning for it. I'm going to get to it, but they don't. And so at the end of the day, you're just like, look, if this really, truly matters to me, I have to take massive action on it now and consistently.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. And I think you hit on it too. And it's the power, not only the power of important questions, but it's we live in a day and age where the data is ubiquitous. Whatever topic you want to look at, sorry, Stu, ubiquitous means like, there's a lot of it. It's ever present.
Yeah, I was actually going to have to go look that up. And so thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I just wanted to save you a couple moments.
It's actually overwhelming how much there is.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, we're being flooded, inundated with data. Yeah.
And you see a level of inaction. And I think a lot of the inaction is driven by overwhelm. Because people have so much. And really, when you boil the most important things down, the answers are things like, very simple, but hard to execute. So like time. Okay. How do I make my relationships better? Oh man, you could read the 15 books on child raising and this and that and the other. No, well, how about this? Time. Just be present. Well, I want my marriage to be better. And there's 10 million pages of marriage advice out there. How about just time? It's simple. How do I lose weight? We all know the equations, right? But I find it intriguing that, in the mastermind that we're in, or the coaching that you have, or whatever, the presence of people asking hard questions puts you in a state of discomfort that forces, at least for me, it is driving action, because I cannot come back the next week and be like, yeah, dudes, I didn't do anything with that, because they're pouring in and they care. And it's so frustrating. And so I'm curious, as a coach, you are like next level, right? Because you're so intentional with the travel. Hey kids, where do you want to go for Christmas? We're going to take 8 weeks and do all these amazing things. But do you believe anybody can do that? And two, I imagine as a coach, it's got to be like, is it frustrating for you? Have you fired clients? Like, this inaction, like how do you deal with that?
Yeah, good. To answer the first question, can anybody do it? That was the first element of my own personal transformation, because for the longest time, I believed wholeheartedly that I couldn't. Like, oh, other people could do this. Dude, they're lucky. Oh, they've got all this stuff, man. Gosh, lucky. And I genuinely, I slunked into this rut of like, I'll always be poor, I'll always be broke, I'll always be insecure and shy. Like, this is just my lot. Somehow I'm fated. And somewhere along that way, it was, I don't know when or why or how, but it just flipped. It's like, wait a minute, if somebody else can do it, then why can't I? That simple question changed everything. Like, wait, if it can be done, then I can do it too. There's a formula, there's a recipe. I got to figure something out. And so, can everybody do it? I don't know. I've met a lot of people. So you guys, I was in Cuba last week. I went down there to help with the hurricane recovery. And fellas, to see communism in real time and to see the devastation and the poverty, like, it changed me. I've been a lot of places. I've seen a lot of things that changed me. And it's a whole paradigm shift of reality. I mean, there's so much we could go into there, but when you just sit down and say, yeah, you can do this. And I think for the most part, the greatest limiting factor I've seen across 5 continents where I've been able to help people is our own limiting beliefs in ourselves. That when it comes down to it, you don't actually believe in yourself. And I found that's predominantly for 2 reasons, which fits right with what we're talking about. Trust is built on character and competence. And character is like, you're a good person, you're going to do what you say. And the competence is you have the skills to do it, right? So if I say I'm going to do something to myself, even if I'm like, look, I'm getting up tomorrow, and then I hit the snooze button, like the very first action of the day is to break a commitment to myself that I made.
Yeah, you've already
and
failed.
The more often, I'll say that again.
Yeah, you've already failed. Yeah.
Right out the gates. My first action today is failure.
Yeah.
And like undermining myself. And so subconsciously, you just pick up on it. You're just like, no, you don't actually do what you say. So now, 1, you've broken character. And then if you do things halfway, you do this crap job and you don't really show up, then you're undermining your own competence. Because like, well, I don't often do what I say. And then if I do it, I don't do it very well. So now I don't even believe myself. And then other people don't believe me. And then subconsciously, I don't believe them either, because I think, they're probably like me. And so here I'm stuck in this hole of not believing that I can do it. And if we switch that with action and internal dialogue, you change, it's called your endophagia, right? The self-talk. If you'll switch that around, man, then you can really start getting things done. You say, yeah, everyone can do this, and I can do this, right? And make it happen.
That's so good,
and then
man.
Remind me the second question. First question was, can anyone do it? Second question was,
the second question was, how do you have you fired clients before because of inaction? Like, have you, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So no, I haven't fired any clients. I have a good filtering system coming in. They know what to expect.
Yeah.
It's often funny. It's funny
right.
How many times people are like, dude, I'm really nervous to reach out to you. because but I need help. Like they get to this point, like, because they know, like, I'm going to be kind about it, but I'm going to like, hey, no, man, what are you doing? And it's not this. It's not what I want. It's not what anyone else's want. I'm like, dude, this is not you at your best self. This is below you, and you know that. Let's go. And when you face
I
that,
love
man,
that. And I think, so you don't have to fire him because you have, and I think where I was, my mind was going with this as well is there's your time and your effort are so valuable to surround yourself by people who share. They may not be where you're at, and they may not be, actually more importantly, they may not be where they're destined to be, where their potential can take them. But understanding understanding the barrier to entry, understanding the standards and the expectations, I think is a huge way in that filter. And we should all be applying more of that. Not that you don't give of yourself and willingly serve others, but when your circle and you're surrounding yourself by, whether it's intentionality through the business or whatever, that bar needs to be high.
yeah.
And it has to be intentional. And you have to ask yourself, is this making me better or is it not? And then you have to address that in an honest way, I think. And so I love how because I think that's a big part of that jet fuel, right? When you talk about decades to days, I think a big part of that is, man, if you're surrounding yourself by a bunch of decade thinkers, then it's going to take decades. Yeah. If you're surrounded by yourself by a bunch of day thinkers, then you're going to start getting after it.
Yeah, you're going to move. And honestly, that comes back. I think what you're saying there is so critical, because it all comes back to a self-selected standard. And most of us have subpar, even mediocre results in our lives simply because we tolerate them. Like, we get what we tolerate. And we don't usually see it as standards, even that we kind of use that word differently. But I love to tell people, I'm like, no, this is a standard. This is my standard. It's not coming from community. It's not coming from social expectations. It's not even coming from a church or from a book or something. Like, I have to make it mine, even if it comes from the Bible, even if it comes from a great leader or mentor. That's still theirs until I own it and make it mine. And then when I raise my standards, I'm like, no, this is just unacceptable of me. I won't tolerate any of these things, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, financial. Like, no, I won't live below that. Those are my standards. It's incredible. Like, you just raise your whole life to another level, and then the results follow.
Yeah, dude, for sure. So David and I, we just finished up our 20-year military career, and we had started some real estate businesses on the side, and we were kind of going down this path of building out these real estate. We were flipping houses and basically creating jobs for ourselves. We had a job, we were creating another job for ourselves, and we kind of had this epiphany moment where we were like, what are we doing, and what's this all for? And it kind of reminds me of one of your stories that you kind of hit on in your speech, about the car accident in your child, and we had some, mentors, conversations with people, and going back to like, what's most important in our lives right now.
Yeah.
And something you said extraordinary marriages don't happen by accident. Yeah. Extraordinary relations don't happen by accident. And that story about your daughter in the car accident really hit hard with me. And if you could, man, can we talk about that a little bit? Let's talk
Absolutely.
about, like, how you put what's most important first, but still, like, do all the things you're doing, right? Yeah. Business and travel and life and all this stuff, but you're still so hyper focused on extraordinary marriages and being an extraordinary dad. Like, how does it all kind of fit together?
Yeah. I was actually talking about, with my kids here this morning in my office, I was talking about that accident again, because it happened this month. It was this month, 12 years ago, I think. And just short version of it, we were driving in a little remote area of Alaska, and this teenager was just hot rodding his car, never even hit the brakes, never even slowed down, just slammed into us. And I went, I'd been an EMT, so I went into EMT mode. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna jump out of the driver's side, run around to the sliding door of my van, and start checking my kids. Threw open my door, and just to my total horror as a father, My little 3-year-old daughter was laying in the weeds across the ditch, and she'd been ejected from the car, right? And snapped her femur in half, and we call it our horrible night of miracles, right? It was just so bad, but it could have been so much worse. And even this morning, I mean, she was sitting right here in front of my desk this morning. We were talking. I can't get mad at that girl. It's impossible. You can't be upset with her. And luckily I don't have to. She's just this angel child.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But whenever I think about that, when you come that close to losing a child, changes everything. My little brother committed suicide last year because of our rough upbringing. He got into drugs. He had a drug addiction for a long time. He took his life. Things got so dark and so sad. He took his life last year. Man, I miss him. It was his birthday 2 weeks ago. And I miss him. And I just sat here a couple weeks ago on his birthday, just crying again, and hurting for him. And it's those reminders. And we all have reminders like that. But it's remembering them and then letting the memory and the lesson drive our decisions. That's the key. That's the key element right there. We have to let the lesson drive our decisions. I could have walked away and went, whew, man, good thing. Well, my kids all made it. We're all good. Okay, let's go. And just forgotten about it and gone on with my life.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. We have to live every moment deliberately. I have to make sure I'm doing things in the best way. Right? It's the right thing policy. You guys have all heard about the right thing policy. Like, no matter the cost, you just do the right thing. Well, what's the right thing? And for me, and again, like I said at the very beginning, I had the advantage of living on my own at 16, of being, of all the things I suffered, fellas, of the hunger, the fear, and the desperation, depression, and all of that, the worst, hands down, the worst was loneliness. Loneliness is horrible. I mean, it's brutal. And you can be surrounded by people and completely alone, right?
Yeah. It's a big issue today.
It's huge. You're right. It's still today. And so instead of sitting there like, this sucks, it's terrible, it's horrible, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do about it? And I think this is where if I have a superpower, it's this thing. I'm like, no, wait, I don't ever want to be lonely again. Well, what does that mean? Okay, I've got to have a world-class marriage and phenomenal relationships with my kids. And I have to be leading out in such a way that my kids want to be around me. They want to hear from me. They actually want to be influenced by me. Where most guys start losing influence with their kids when they're teens or young adults, I'm like, I'm going to keep increasing my influence. I'm leading the way. And one of you mentioned time early on, and I wanted to share this. Like, I lay out my calendar, and I make sure I go on a date with my wife every month, and a date every week,
yeah,
an overnighter every month, and then a 2 or 3 day trip every quarter, and then we take a 10 to 14 day trip, just the two of us, to some epic place around the world every year.
It's awesome. And
you might be listening and thinking, well, wow, geez, how do you do that? How do you pull that up? You're lucky. I'm like, no, it's not luck. He's just like, this is a priority. How am I going to make this happen? My wife and I take our kids on dates every week. We rotate. Every kid gets a date. And then we take them on cool adventures. So right after I met you guys, I took an overnight flight to Maine, met my boys up there. We had this awesome, like, epic, out in the woods, manly father-son adventure. It was so cool. And then, I train with him. I play volleyball with my daughter because she loves that right now. And I build things with my son. He's a hands-on kind of guy. And then, you're intentional about really connecting, not the superficial stuff, not checking the boxes, really, really connecting. And it's as simple as like spending some time writing it down. It's like, hey, what does world-class look like? Okay, let me share this framework. I just did a podcast on this because it's such a simple framework. You take a piece of paper, you break it into 3 columns. Left-hand column is failure, middle column is mediocrity, and right-hand column is excellence. And you literally take any aspect of your life and plug it in there. So marriage, what does failure look like? Well, it's a horrible, ugly, painful divorce. What does mediocrity look like? You're like roommates. You exist, but sex is weak or rare. It's all transactional. You talk about the bills and taking care of this and running errands, and you're doing house together, but you're roommates. And what does excellence look like? Whoa, man, we're best friends. There's spark and romance. We still make out all the time. We love our dates, have sex all the time, like love going on adventures. We're just excited to be together. Well, you write that out and it's so easy to see. And then you're like, okay, how do I make that happen? And again, just to take that simple framework and do it every part of your life, and then just take action on it starting right now.
Great, dude. I love that, man.
Yeah.
I love that. It's and you talk about the framework, and it can be, I think there's so many different ways that we can make this magic happen, right? Like you can, it can be just a list. Like we talked about this yesterday, and it's so challenging, and I love it. But in this group, we're like, okay, guys, what's your role as a father? And what's your role as a husband? We're saying these two things. We'll start at these two things. Father and husband are like the most important in the house for us in our roles. All right. So have you ever written out in words what those roles are? No, I never have. Like I was leading this discussion, not leading it. I was facilitating and offering a challenge, but then I'm like, dude, I have never literally just taken the simple step. And I love to write. I've never just written the words down and taken the process of thinking through what these words, like looking them up in the dictionary, putting in a definition, going to the next level. I want to tie this to a verse in the Bible. And how does this hit all of the emotional, physical, spiritual elements of who I am to build that connection, that line, that passion? And then I execute it, right? And I read it every morning. And before I get in an argument with my wife or a sensitive conversation, I read, what are my roles as a husband? Oh man, this is going to be challenging in this upcoming conversation. And I was thinking about, I'm getting emotional now because of what also drove it is my role as a coach, coaching my boys' football team. And I realized that my roles that I've not written out yet, this was a conversation yesterday, but I need to write those out because I need to be that coach, that man, that influence for these boys. Because right now I'm just like potentially a grumpy dude that has some poor body language because we're not winning a flag football game for a bunch of 9-year-olds. But the opportunity that exists is to be so intentional that these words, these roles define who I am and drive all the interactions with these kids, with my wife, with my kids. And so I would encourage, if you're listening, I would encourage you to take the priority things and just do something on paper. Just do something, because it could be the thing that is a catalyst that propels you to a different level. And I'm saying this from a position of I need to do this as well, because I want epic, like I feel not an unhealthy jealousy for what you do, but I feel it's not a jealousy for what you do, Greg. It's a jealousy for the intentionality with which you do it.
Yeah.
Because you're Greg and I'm David, and Stu is a knucklehead, right? So we all have different levels of what we desire. And I don't want what Greg does. I mean, a lot of it I do, but it's not because Greg, it's because the intentionality to do it.
Yep.
That's what I love about it.
It's defining your unique dream for you as an individual, then with your wife, and then with your children. It's getting crystal clear about that dream and then executing it. And what you're saying there is what I also have observed so much is like so many of us, our challenge is we lack clarity. And we haven't yet gone through the writing exercise or even the mental exercise of what does that exactly mean? Like, what is I really, really want? Who do I want to be? How do I want to treat other people? What are the principles and practices that govern my life? Right. And if we're not clear about those three things, we're floundering around, and you're kind of driven about by the winds and the waves of life, and you're irritable and you're frustrated and you're procrastinating and you're wondering why it's not working. I love your example. You're sitting there, the kids are losing, and they're kids, and you're like, they're losing, and you're like, and we might even make a situation worse by not being intentional about, wait a minute, I'm going to think through this ahead of time. If these awesome little kids lose a game, what's the best thing I can be for them? And then you write that down and you lean into it, right? Because you're so intentional about, okay, give me the worst case scenario. Like everything's falling apart. It's all going down. Like everything's, people are getting negative and pessimistic and sad and discouraged. Who do I want to be in that moment? That's leadership. And you've written it down and you're clear about it, right? And
when you see it too, right? You see what that looks like when someone is, you may not go through the process of, oh, this guy is very intentional and he must be, no, like my language is, and there's an example for my son's soccer coach. I'm like, he loves the kids. Like that's what pops in my head is he just loves these kids. He's arguing with dads. Like he was not arguing, it was friendly, but he was explaining to me why my son was being lazy and not doing sprints as I thought he should with the rest of his team. But he took a different approach and was like, hey, dude, your son's kind of tired. School is rough today. And he's so empathetic and so loving. And I'm like, wow, you're arguing with me. Awesome. You're out loving my son right now. And I'm his dad. Like that's my role. Yeah. But you see it, right? You see, and you don't necessarily put words to it, but you feel it. Mm-hmm. And you're inspired by it and you want to follow it.
So true. So true. If I could, I want to really emphasize, because I don't think we can emphasize enough what you were saying earlier about writing that down and getting clear about who you want to be and how you want to operate. And like I said earlier, I had an advantage because at 16, I started a list of the qualities I wanted in my wife and the attributes I wanted in our marriage. And I kept that with me until I met my wife. And I added to it. When I saw things I just didn't want, I wrote a bunch of that. And when I saw things I did, I wrote that down too. And ultimately I realized that list was a list for me of how to become a better person, right? Like, here's this perfect wife. I'm like, oh man, this list I just made for her is my list of like to-dos, who I better become. But having the list made all the difference. And what you're saying is right there. I did this little practice. I'll share this. Maybe it'll be helpful for somebody. I would go through, and maybe you guys have experienced this as well, as like I would read something or I notice somebody like that, right? The coach is so loving and so understanding these kids. I want to be more like that. And you'd work on it for a few days, but then you forget. And then maybe a few weeks or a few months later, you're like, oh, I was supposed to be working on that. And I totally forgot it. And I would go through that and I'd read a book. I'm going to do this. And then I'm like, forget. And then I'm going to reread it and get excited. And ultimately I came up with this idea. I call it my philosophy journal. It's this leather journal I have here. And I'm like, you know what? In this journal, I'm going to write down scriptures, quotes, poems, ideas that are the constitution for my life. This right here, this is the guiding document for me. So I'm not writing down like, this is what happened today or this experience. This in my philosophy journal, the only things going here are my best self belief systems, strategies, ideologies, like what's going in here, that this is the kind of man I want to be. And this is the caliber of life I want to live. And then I reread it and reread it and reread it. And you touch bases with it every morning. Fellas, it is so hard, if not impossible, to get lost in life if you check the map every morning.
Dude, that's so good, man.
But we'll go weeks or months without ever looking at the map. Well, yeah. It's like my wife says, you start Google Maps to drive somewhere and you throw your phone in the back seat and just kind of wander. Like, come on, man, check the map. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm implementing that today. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, a part of where this all started, we were speaking at Life and Air, and Life and Air has kind of a similar idea, philosophy. Like, they say, hey, write a vision for your life. Yeah. Right. And then read that vision and, sit in it and actually visualize it and go to it every single day. And that eventually does come true. It's awesome. It's amazing. But I love this philosophy journal idea because there's so many verses and quotes and just ideologies that you're right. Like, you forget if you don't check in with it. Hey, I want to hit on something else before our time is up. You had mentioned you went to Cuba to do some work, and another quote that I wrote down from your speech that I thought was amazing was you said that the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of our impact. And I know you are very intentional with your family wherever you're going in the world, and you've gone a lot of places that you are serving and that you are going and making an impact to do better, whatever that is. How do you implement that in your family? And I mean, you showed us pictures of your kids like super young, right? And going and doing service, community stuff. I think it's so rad, man. I wish uh, everyone had that type of mindset.
Yeah. Again, I kind of feel like I had an advantage because of my quote disadvantage in those hardest times when I just felt like giving up. Somebody would just a little act of kindness, a little act of generosity. And it was like, I'm getting emotional right now. It was so transformative for me in those moments that somebody like learn about my situation, or a total stranger's like, what, dude? You don't have any food? Hold on, I'll be right back. And they come back with a whole box of food. And I'm like, what? Why are you doing this for me? Why would you do that? Right? That changes you to the deepest level. And then since then, I felt this moral obligation to make the most of myself so that I have more than enough to spare. I have more than enough time freedom and money freedom and skills. I need knowledge and skills. So I really have something valuable to pass on to others who are struggling, most of the time for no fault of their own. So, we've been working with organizations, or our favorite thing is just paying attention. Just notice, get out and live life, and you'll notice. You'll see when there's opportunities like, oh man, I really need to buy all the groceries for the lady in front of me. And you just reach out like, hey, would it be okay if I just get everything for you today? And if you're paying attention, and I think God and the universe are conspiring in our favor all the time. He will put us in the right spot, and we got to pay attention.
Yeah.
So if you're in there, you're like, ooh, this is it. And then boom, the tears come down, the story comes out, and you're like, yep, there it is. That was the right thing to do. And then if you make it a way of being, it's not a checklist. So initially you're like, oh, okay, we gotta look for a project, we're looking for something. But if you make it a way of being, then your kids just grow up saying, oh, that's just how we do life. They don't even know any
love
different.
that.
They're just like, oh, yeah, I noticed that person needs help. I'll see my kids do it now. So, well, and again, it's all modeling, right? So we work out hard as a family. Like we're staying in phenomenal condition. So my two teenage boys they're just stacked, right? Which is it's a fun element by itself. And my daughters too. They're really tough. We do Krav Maga together, so they can defend themselves, they can fight, and they can care. They're awesome. So we're on this backpacking trip, and without me saying anything, without anybody saying anything, my boys noticed a couple of the participants were struggling. They're like, hey, let me take your pack. Because I'd been doing that. They'd seen me do it from Mount Everest to Iceland, all over the place. And so they're like, I look, I'm talking, helping people, whatever. I look up, both my boys have 2 packs on, and they're just laughing and smiling, zipping up this volcano in Central America, double packed. And like, no, I'm good, let's go. I'm like, that's how we roll, boys, right? That's how we do things. And if we'll look for opportunities and then specifically prepare ourselves to help, like and this isn't, I'm not bragging, nor am I exaggerating. I've lost count of the opportunities I've had to like either rescue people or give medical treatment or aid. I've literally carried people out of austere environments in mountains. Well, I told you guys at one point, this young woman died in my arms in South America. I went up to help in a rescue situation. And it's not coincidental. It's like, I just let God know, look, I'm ready. I'm going to get the skills and I want to help. And he'll just put me in spots where you can help and you can be of service. And so I actually found this beautiful organization. It's like, I've been looking for these guys for like 14 years. It's called Aerial Recovery. And they bring in this is awesome Christian organization based out of Tennessee. And is started by some entrepreneurs and former special forces guys. And so they bring in these special forces guys, take all the skills and experience they have and turn it to humanitarian efforts. It is awesome. And so like whenever there's natural disasters or man-made disasters, we're rolling in like let's get there. Let's be the first ones on the ground. Let's really help. And so this organization, they were one of the first ones into Florida. And then I went with one of their teams, and we were one of the first ones into Cuba. And you get on the ground
Cool.
and you get you guys, the stories, the experiences, the indescribable blessing and privilege to go help someone who's really in need.
Yeah.
Priceless.
Dude, we haven't started it yet. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I really want to get my kids involved in that kind of stuff, right? Like taking them, on mission trips and letting them see parts of the world that, not a lot of people see, and understanding how privileged we truly are, right? And having that mindset, that service mindset, that servant leader. And it's awesome, man. I applaud you. I think what you're doing is amazing, and you're motivating me big time. So I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. And your kids are right. That's such a fun age, man.
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
My
And at that
4-year-old
age
cannot be fun sometimes, but
yeah, that's true, right? They can be tough.
Sometimes I want to just
yeah, exactly. You want to wrestle with them and squish them.
Yeah.
But at that age, brother, that's where they see you leading out. And so at that age, they're not going to participate much. In fact, we probably shouldn't expect them to participate much. So if they just want to watch, great, it's at their age. But they're absorbing everything. They are sponges, and they're watching you interact with other people and learning how to interact. They're watching you serve and give, and they see how you operate, and that's all going into their hard wiring, so that in 10 years from now, they know how to handle these situations because they watched. They saw you lead the way.
Dude, it's so true. It's crazy, man. I was going through some mail, and my wife, we live right by Red Rocks Amphitheater, and my wife recently took my daughter to her first concert. It was a Lauren Daigle concert, and she was loving it. But she came home and she's like, "Daddy," and for years I've been I say me because it's primarily my effort, but for years we've been sponsoring kids through Compassion in Haiti and writing letters. And I show them, and my daughter came home. She's like, "Daddy, I hope you don't mind. We're sponsoring a kid." Like me and Chloe, her friend, she's like, they gave this presentation, and I wanted to sponsor this kid. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Like, you have to write letters. There's a responsibility. This kid now is relying on you as a point of, hope and connection. But it was really cool because it wasn't prompted by my wife, or I wasn't even there. But you see, man, it's so empowering, but it's also super powerful because it's a challenge, man. Like, they are watching. My kids are starting to ask about our mastermind, and they're not involved in that at all. Like, it's just, they see Uncle Stewie and me talking about it, but man, they're always paying attention, and they're always holding you to account for that say-do gap. Like, Dad, you said, but and so I think that's a great observation, and it's super powerful. And you've obviously experienced it times 7. So you have some mileage on that.
And it becomes this driving force, doesn't it? Like, I remember early on where I would, like, the way I would get after my kids when they're real, "Hey, don't do that." And then I saw them interacting with each other. I'm like, they learned that from me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm done right here. I draw the line. I'm like, I taught my kids how to get after each other. I'm like, I'm done with that. Like, no, I'm not doing it anymore. And so they're always watching. And so I guess the thing I like to think about and check in with myself all the time is like, am I truly, not the show, not the pretense, not the mask, am I truly modeling for my kids how to be just a superb human being? And man, that drives me, and it motivates me and excites me, and it's intimidating, right? That's a high standard. But what else do we want? We want to live an underwhelming life? No thanks, man.
No thanks.
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Dude, this has been a lot of fun. I we probably talk for another hour. I know you probably have a calendar schedule, and so do we. But I really appreciate you coming on, man. This was a lot of fun. Motivated me to no end, to just go be better, man, and be intentional about our life. and go be the best husbands and dads that we could possibly be. It's good stuff. I really appreciate it.
And a lot of honor and praise to you, gentlemen, for caring, for leading, for stepping up and doing what you're doing and giving back. And way to kudos and praise to you. We need more good men in the world. And I feel like whenever we can collaborate like this and wherever we can rise up, it just has this compounding effect across communities, then societies, then civilizations. Like we can all be a little better and do a little more. And the long-term generational effect of that is immeasurable. I meet with clients all the time who are still struggling deeply from things they picked up from their parents, who picked it up from their parents, and who knows where it was before that. And we can change that. The ripple effect is off the charts. It's so awesome.
For sure, man. Well, dude, how do people find more about you? Where do they get connected with you and learn more about everything that you're doing?
Yeah. My wife and I co-host a podcast called the Extraordinary Family Life podcast. Then I do one called the Be the Man podcast. And then we have extraordinaryfamilylife.com is our website. And then, part of our life mission now is taking all the cool things we've learned and experienced around the world in our learning journey and just sharing it. So we're just helping families and couples and people all over the place. And we lead trips around the world and just create a cool experience. We're just here to help. So if you got listeners have questions or like, what about this problem or how do I overcome this? I love to answer questions and help out however I can. Just kind of share the things that are working for us.
Awesome, dude. Well, we'll put all your links in our show notes and spread the word about all the good stuff you're doing for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah. Appreciate David, you got anything else?
Yeah, man. Greg, just so appreciative. I listen to Rick Warren a lot. Love how he just takes the complicated nature of scripture and puts it in bite-sized things that we can handle. But one of the things that he says, man, he says one of the scariest prayers that you can ever say to God is use me.
Yeah.
Use me. And he said, if you say that prayer in earnest and with true conviction, stand by and be careful because he will use you. And you really highlight it. So that's, as you're telling your stories about people just being present and being available, that hit me like a ton of bricks because, man, God's using you, right? But it's your willingness to be there and to be used and to make an impact. And it's not pride driven. It's not selfish. It's just use me, Lord. And so I just want to encourage you in that. You inspire. I love what you're doing. I love the family vision. It challenges me, which is I think challenging somebody is more important than inspiring sometimes because it drives action. It forces you to want to be better because you're uncomfortable. And that's where the challenge is. And so I love it, man. I think you're making an impact on people that you don't even know you're making. And changing lives that you don't even know you're changing. So keep crushing it, man. I love it.
Thanks, fellas. This is awesome.
Guys and gals, reach out to Greg. Hey, if you like this show, share it. Do a screenshot, share it on your socials, tag Greg. Hey, let's go fill the storehouse together.
Amen. Hey, use me. Be
Boom.
Used. Make it a great day.
See you.
Get it.
Dude, I don't know about you, but have a lot of takeaways from this episode. I feel like this was just like a huge mentorship session for the two of us.
Yeah. I think what I really enjoyed about it is the emphasis on sometimes there's additional requirements, go get a coach. There's other ways to, pour jet fuel on your growth. But I loved all the practical advice that he gives. I love all the action items that he gave. And it really inspired me to make some changes and do some things. Not just talk about it, but to do some things. So great episode. Greg, amazing guy, absolute inspiration. Loved it.
For sure, man. One thing that continues to stick with me, he said, is when the time to perform has arrived, the time to prepare has gone. Just motivates me to just continue to prepare, do things every single day, get 1% better every day. That's something that we've been really intentional inside the Storehouse Mastermind. We're opening up another group. The men inside that are intentional, getting better every single day. And we'd love, for our listeners to be a part of that. Storehouse Mastermind, go to storehouse310.com/mastermind. There's a big join now button. Hit that so we can be intentional together and grow.
Less talking, more doing. Let's get it.
Boom. See ya.
Thanks for listening to Filling the Storehouse. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe and share it with someone you love. And if you really felt inspired, leave a 5-star review so we could continue to grow and help other Christian entrepreneurs fill their storehouse. If you're interested in creating financial freedom through real estate investing, be sure to check out our website at storehouse310turnkey.com. We'd love to serve you through our platform of building the kingdom. Just click on the contact link and we'll reply to you as soon as we can. Again, thanks so much for listening. Now go fill your storehouse and make it a great day.